Who's that coming down the track? It's the mean machine, the red and black. Ain't nothing finer in the land than a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan. Go Dogs. We did it. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Catching Flies podcast. I am Stephen Burton. Super pumped today. As we saw last night, the Georgia Bulldogs flat out demolished the TCU Horned Frogs. A perfect way to end the college football season for me. A great year by my Dawgs. But here to break it all down with me, as always, he has a master's degree. He is very sad today. He is the Greek philosopher, Pete Makatis. What's going on, Petey? Are you doing all right?
I'm doing fine. Oh, boy. I was sad yesterday. I'm sad today. It's going to take me a little while to realize that TCU accomplished a great deal this season. We had a great season. And if you told me before the season we would make the title game, I would be happy about that for sure. But all that said, that was not pleasant for me to watch. That wasn't pleasant for any other TCU fan to watch. I feel like we should call PETA because that was frog abuse. I mean, just all around a tough situation, but it must be said that Georgia team is something special. I didn't expect TCU to win. If we won, it would have been a massive upset. We'll get into the game a little bit deeper on my end regarding that. But, yeah, there's no question about it. Georgia is a well-deserving national champion. I suspect, and we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but I suspect they'll win a third next year. There's no reason to believe otherwise. But hell of a game, Steve. Y'all deserved the title. Do you want to tell us about your side of the game? I'll get into my side of the game a little bit, and we're going to give Steven a little bit of a victory speech at the end of this. But tell us, I mean, it's hard to break down a 65-7 game, but give it your best shot, Bo.
Right. Well, there's so many things that went right for Georgia. It started with the run game. Kenny McIntosh got us off the ground going. Brock Bowers had a killer game. I mean, 150-plus receiving and a touchdown. I mean, like Pete said, everything was going our way. We seemed to be more physical, seemed to be more prepared for the moment. Pete said it best when he said TCU's magic might run out midway through the second quarter, and he was pretty close to it. There was a super pivotal play that we're going to break down a little later that from that moment forward, it was all Dogs, and we just dominated the game. We played our brand of football and escaped with the W. It was an incredible night. The mantra all year has been go for 2 and 22, so we accomplished that. And I guess now it's go for 3 and 23.
That's going to last for the whole decade if you keep winning.
Right.
You go for 8 and 28 by the time we get around to it.
It sounds so good.
So you're going to see highlights of this game. You're going to see breakdowns of this game. You're going to read articles about this game. You're going to watch YouTube videos about this game. All that stuff's going to happen, and they're going to talk about stuff that went right, stuff that went wrong. We're going to give you the true pivotal play of the game, and other areas of coverage for this game aren't going to give you this play. Steven and I watched this game together. We made that agreement. If TCU were to play Georgia, for sure, that we were going to watch the game together. And at some point early in the second quarter, middle second quarter, TCU was down 17-7. And it was 3rd and 17. And they completed a pass for an 11-yard gain. And the 11-yard gain was maxed out. They were not getting any more yards than that. They didn't try to throw the ball too deep down the field. So that got me excited. Because I'm like, cool, we're inside the 50. We're about the 47-yard line. We're going to go for it on 4th and 6 and see if we can't get a foothold in this game. It's 17-7. It's not over by any means, but we have a chance. We have a chance to make sure that this stays a game. and they sent out the punting unit. And I turned to Steven, I'm like, this game is over. And he kind of didn't want to agree with me. I think he maybe thought the game was over as soon as the game started. But that's the Georgia fan in him talking. But as an objective analyst, we can look at that game and say it's over because, even as a TCU fan, we've been talking on this pod about the talent level just not being to Georgia's level. You can't beat Georgia in a straight fight. You don't have the horses. You don't have the talent to do that. It's not to diss TCU's players. But, I broke down the recruiting classes in the last show or 2 shows ago. And those numbers don't lie. They just don't lie. So when you're down 10, you're inside your opponent's territory. I understand it was like the 47-yard line. But you're inside their territory. And you're giving them the ball back on a makeable 4th down. It wasn't 4th and 20. It was 4th and 6. And, the game was over. It was really over at that point, especially if Georgia were to score. And that's when I turned around and I told Steven, I'm like, if you all get points on this drive, we're not coming back. And truth be told, it was a good punt. We forced a fair catch at the 6-yard line. And it took them about 4 plays to get right back to where they would have been had we failed a 4th down. Right. And I think the white flag at 17-7 in the second quarter was waved. Georgia took the ball. Took it all the way down for a touchdown. They made it 24-7. TCU never sniffed the end zone again. And Georgia scored about 776 more points. And that would put him right at 800 exactly, by the way. And that was all she wrote. So I do need to go into some of the positives of this game for TCU. You ready for this? So before the game, Lee Corso predicted that TCU would win the game, and he was clearly wrong. The positive is that we kept the margin of victory lower than Lee Corso's age. So that's one positive for TCU. I believe Corso's about 87.
Yes.
We're not even exaggerating on this one, Paul. He's 87. Number 2, you might say Quentin Johnson didn't have a very good game. He only had 1 reception. Well, I'll tell you what. He had as many tackles in this game as he did receptions because
almost the same as yards.
Right?
He had 3 yards, and he had 2 tackles.
Yeah, so, that's a positive. He might play defense on the next level. The next positive, Georgia can no longer score any more points. The game is over, and they're stuck at 65, and that's going to be the end of that. And to quote Pat McAfee, he said the only thing that stopped Georgia in this game was the end zone. So clearly I'm being a little sarcastic here, guys. The loss hurts. It really does. TCU fans, I hope you're not thinking I'm taking it lightly. We did have a great season. We're going to come back next year as the defending national runner-up. And we started the season without a single vote in the AP poll or the college poll. So there are some positives to be taken from that. That said, we did not win the championship. The University of Georgia Bulldogs won the championship. And we here at the Catching Flies podcast would like to give Stephen Burton, lifelong Georgia fan, the opportunity to make his victory speech. Steve, the floor is yours.
What a great day to be a Dog fan. For 25 plus years, I've basically waited for the last 2 years. So many years we'd get so close and Florida'd beat us, or we'd lose in the conference championship game, not make it to the title game. So many close calls that led to, great teams just falling short. But the last 2 years, all the puzzle pieces have finally been put in place. And Kirby Smart has turned Georgia into a dynasty. And the scary thing is this team is probably the least talented Georgia team that we're going to have over the next 4 to 5 years. The recruiting is off the charts. It's a top 2, top 3 class every year, and that's how you maintain excellence in college football, such a high turnover. So Georgia's set up for the long haul, but you definitely want to celebrate this. This game had me nervous going into it. I thought that there was some potential matchups that TCU could take advantage of, but tonight, for whatever reason, if the moment was too big or, Max Max Duggan was just fugazi and they weren't as good as they thought. Whatever the case was, Georgia came out and played their brand of football and, kind of put the world on notice that I think the Bama dynasty is officially over. And I think that 2020s can be the decade of the dog. And, I'm just super proud of this team. Stetson Bennett has to go down as one of the greatest walk-ons of all time. I mean, with J.J. Watt, Clay Matthews, Baker Mayfield, to lead the team as a quarterback to 2 straight titles. I mean, only one other team in the last 40 years has done that. So, it's just truly incredible. You got to give all the credit in the world to TCU. They had a great year. What this does for this college, it will help them a lot. They're going to get a recruiting bump. They're going to get a lot of money to help improve their facilities, and that's, where it starts. And I'm proud of Georgia. I can't believe that it happened. I didn't think we were going to go all the way. Ohio State game was tough. We barely edged them out, but that's what we do. We find a way to win, and I can't say anymore. Just go Dogs.
With the national championship here, your second consecutive title, you are the reigning, defending, undisputed champion of the world. And with that, I request officially, sir, that we move on from college football for the time being and enter the professional ranks. Sir, is this okay with you?
I guess with one final go Dogs. Okay. Sick 'em. Hoo.
I do want to say TCU, Kirby Smart, all you guys, thank you. Thank you for this season. Honestly, it's been a thrill ride. It didn't end the way I wanted, clearly. It ended the way I expected once we made the title game. But
hurry back, college football.
Yeah.
I miss you so much.
It's time for college football to take a little detour into the off season. We'll revisit it. We're not going to leave it alone completely for the whole off season, but we are going to turn our focus now to the professional ranks, to the NFL. And those of you who listen to the pod on a weekly basis might notice we haven't touched on the NFL as much lately. And that's not for lack of caring. I mean, we are strictly sticking to the NFL. We are watching the NFL, and we are loving the NFL. Steven and I have successful teams in that league this year as well, which has just worked out wonders for us too. But just other things have taken our attention. The World Cup gave us a soccer episode. Free agency gave us a baseball episode. The college football playoffs, never mind the fact that our 2 teams played each other in a championship game, gave us a couple episodes. So we have actually reached the end of the NFL season. Whereas college has ended the season completely, the NFL regular season has come to an end, and we have 14 playoff teams, and we have 6 playoff matchups this week. What Steven and I want to do is take a look at each team in the playoffs and briefly describe to you why this team could win the Super Bowl and why they won't win the Super Bowl. Even the so-called worst teams, we're going to give you a reason why we think they can win the Super Bowl. And even the best teams, we're going to give you reasons why they might not. So we're going to actually go in reverse seeding order, starting with the AFC. I'm going to take first one. I'm going to take the number 7 seed in the AFC based on their 11-6 victory, fun score, this past week over the Jets. That would be the Miami Dolphins. So how can the Miami Dolphins win the Super Bowl? They can throw the ball about 50 times a game and make sure Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are eating until they've thrown up, and then feed them some more, let them eat some more. That's how they can win. That's how they can win the Super Bowl. That's the team. And I don't care if it's Tua Tagovailoa in there or if it's Jacoby Brissett. Wait, Jacoby Brissett's on the Browns now. Right. Teddy Bridgewater. God, these guys change teams. I can't keep track. Brissett was a Dolphin at one point. I know he was. Teddy Bridgewater, even Skylar Thompson. Just feed those two. Feed them. Even if it's just little flare passes. Let them give you the opportunity to make something happen. Why the Dolphins might not win the Super Bowl? Let's face it, they're not a great team. They lost 5 in a row before they got into this last game. They finished the season 9-8. 9 team wins, have won a Super Bowl before, once anyway. A couple have gotten to the Super Bowl, but it would take something crazy. They'd have to win every single game on the road, starting in Buffalo, which has been a very, very tough place to win over the last 3 years. Not to say that it hasn't happened, but yeah, Miami just doesn't have the squad this year. I think they kind of overachieved to make the playoffs in the first place. So good for them, but that's how they wouldn't do it. So, Steven, you're up next.
All right, I have the Ravens, and it's pretty easy with the Ravens. If Lamar's healthy, they have a chance to beat anybody. If Lamar's not playing, zero chance. They do have a decent defense. Say that 5 times fast. But other than that, they have the god of kickers and Justin Tucker, who is a weapon. But to sum it up, Lamar Jackson plays, they got a shot. If not, no chance.
Ravens were a simple one, man. I gave you a freebie on that one.
Softball lob.
I feel like I've got an easy one here, too. I'm going to take the number 5 seed in the AFC, the Los Angeles Chargers. I've been practicing that because I knew I was going to say San Diego, the Los Angeles Chargers. They can win the Super Bowl because, for similar reasons to Miami, they have a dynamic passing attack, but they also, if healthy, have a tremendous pass rush. And it starts with your 2 guys on the edges. You got Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. Now, Khalil Mack's not the same player he was. That's to say that he was thoroughly dominant before. Now he's just kind of dominant. And Joey Bosa obviously is one of the best football players in the world, even though he's maybe the second best player in his family. But that's a different story. How they won't win the Super Bowl? Y'all, they the Chargers. And I have taken to using charger as a verb, as in to screw something up. You charger something up. They find ways to lose. And it wouldn't be surprising if they won their first game, maybe even their second game. At some point, they'll find a way to lose. And that seems like I'm copping out and I'm not giving you a straight answer. But, it's the Chargers. On paper, they're one of the best teams in football. Yet they've just now made the playoffs after a couple years of not making it. And even that, they weren't division champions by any means. It's tough playing in a division with the Chiefs, I understand, but they're the Chargers, and they find ways to mess things up. Health is also an issue, of course, but they're the Chargers, man. And that's simple enough. Steven, you're up next.
All right. The Jaguars, who got in with a thrilling overtime win against the Titans.
Didn't quite go to overtime, but it threatened it.
Okay. I was thinking of the other game.
Rams Seahawks.
Yeah, that's the one that went to overtime. My mistake. But this team, how they can win it, they can get hot. Trevor Lawrence has been playing really great ball. He's a leader of the offense and probably the whole team for that matter. But that's about their only chance. They do have a decent defense, but the only way they're going to win is if Trevor Lawrence really plays like he played at Clemson, and that's out of his mind. Why Jacksonville won't win? Well, much like the Chargers, they're the Jaguars. They usually find a way to lose, whether that's turnovers. Lawrence, has been known to throw an interception or two. If they have a fumble or two. And they are a really young team. I think they have a good nucleus. This is a good year for them. They as a learning experience. They get to the playoffs. They know what it's like to win the division now. Now next year you repeat that. You go out, you draft well, you build, and hopefully get better for next year. But the reason they won't lose, they're just not good enough.
All right, excellent. Now we are getting into the meat of the AFC, the 3 teams that are by far the favorites to win the AFC, or co-favorites, again, in this point. So I have the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, before the season, I predicted that the Bengals would be a better team than they were last year with a worse record. Well, that didn't happen. Their record actually did improve. And they found a lot of ways to win a lot of games that maybe last year, even though they made it to the Super Bowl, they wouldn't have. Certainly, more than 2 years ago, they would not have won those games. So the Bengals can win the Super Bowl because they're stacked, y'all. They got great players at every position. You're going to hear about Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and that's fine. They deserve their credit. But how many people talk about DJ Reader or Logan Wilson or Jermaine Pratt, who's having a great season? Jesse Bates playing with a chip on his shoulder. Eli Apple, who was a draft bust, has all of a sudden become a major contributor to a Super Bowl contending team. They've got the talent. And if you have the talent, you have a chance to win, period. Why they might not win. They sometimes struggle to score touchdowns. They kicked 12 field goals in the playoffs last year en route to the Super Bowl. Okay, McPherson literally had to make 4 field goals every game. It was enough. So we're not denying them that because they clearly made it to the Super Bowl. I don't think they can repeat that. If their red zone success or if their inability to punch the ball into the end zone is not there, they're not going to win. They might not get out of the first round. So that's what might be holding the Bengals back.
All right, on to the Bills. Now, this is an easy one. Obviously, the Bills have a high-octane offense, so to me, they can beat any team in the league and win the Super Bowl. Their offense with Diggs, Josh Allen, Gabe Davis, Knox, they're just absolutely loaded on offense. And their defense has a bunch of headhunters. They've got some dogs on the D side. So, Bills are one of the best, to me, top 2-3 teams in the entire league. I think they'll definitely be competing for the AFC Championship. And the reason that they will not make it to the Super Bowl or, maybe even not out of the first round, this team has a tendency to kind of play down to the level of other teams. I look at the Minnesota Vikings game, which I'm a Vikings fan, but, we had no business winning that game. The Bills kind of played down to the Vikings level, and that cost them. And then it was the same way against like the Dolphins and some of their other losses. So if they come out a little flat, they've had a lot going on in the world. This last week, everyone knows one of their players got severely hurt on the field, and it changed a lot for this playoffs. But they seem to be okay this past week in their game, but you never know how it's going to affect them. So I think off-field distractions or playing down to their competition's level could be a reason why the Bills lose.
Let's go ahead and wrap up the AFC here, and I have landed the number 1 seed, Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs can win the Super Bowl because they have Patrick Mahomes. Now, I am not normally a QB-centric focused analyst, but Mahomes breaks the mold. He is the one guy that if you took him off his team, you would really, really notice. He makes throws no one can. He makes plays no one can. He can run the ball. He is potentially the greatest quarterback the NFL's ever seen. And that's tough to say early in his career, but it might be true. So as long as he's on that team, Andy Reid's on that team, they're going to have a chance. And, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, since he's become their starting quarterback, have never played a road playoff game, not counting neutral site Super Bowls. So they're not going to do it this year either, maybe. We'll get to that in a second. But at the very least, they're not going to play in someone's stadium. Why they might not win the Super Bowl, and I think a lot of people might expect me to say, well, Mahomes might revert to a turnover type guy, and that's true. But the reason I would think that they don't win a Super Bowl, if that's the case, is the defense. They don't have a bad defense. They have a reasonably opportunistic defense. But they don't have the kind of defense where they can run them out there and have the kind of confidence that they can give the ball back to the offense. If a team grinds out the clock on them, hits them with some short passes, runs the ball, wins the time of possession battle, and there are teams in the AFC bracket that can do that. And there are teams coming out of the NFC that can do that should the Chiefs make it to the Super Bowl. That would prevent them from winning it. That's our look at the AFC. Steven's going to start us off now here in the NFC.
All right, we're starting off with Seattle. They snuck in on the last week of the season. I think as an overachieving team, though, as a whole, they were not projected to make the playoffs with Geno Smith coming in as their quarterback this year. I think the expectations were very low. But I'm going to give you a reason why they can win, potentially, the Super Bowl. And that is Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. They have a high-octane offense that can put up numbers. And if they get into a good rhythm in today's football, a great offense usually beats a good defense in today's football. So Seattle, I think, has an outside chance just because Lockett and Metcalf are so good. but they're going to have to, have a lot of things go right for them. Now, the reason why they can't make the Super Bowl, and that's pretty simple, because they do lack talent. I think they definitely overachieved this year. They're going to have, via the Russell Wilson trade, a top 3 pick, and really be able to improve this team a lot over the next year or two with those draft picks. So I think Seattle's a year or two away still, but anybody can get hot.
Speaking of anybody able to get hot, I have to be the reason I give to the New York Giants, the team I have next, because nothing really screams we can win the Super Bowl with this team. Sorry, Giants fans. You did good to make the playoffs. My understanding, I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but they beat one team this year with a winning record, maybe two. If you have any kind of chance, Brian Dable does some kind of math. That dude's a good head coach. I think we can tell that after 1 year. I think it's pretty evident he knows what he's doing. He deserves that head coaching job. The reason they shouldn't or wouldn't or couldn't win this Super Bowl is because they just don't have, I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, they don't have the Super Bowl level talent required. If we're talking about position by position, look, you got one premium player, and that's Saquon Barkley, and that's at a non-premium position. They've got solid players. They really do. They have, and you can't make the playoffs without solid players. But they would also likely have to win 3 consecutive road wins in the playoffs. The only way that wouldn't happen is if somehow they met the Seahawks in the NFC title game, and at that point the world's broken if that happens, so it doesn't matter anyway. So yeah, the Giants, uphill climb, can't see it happening.
How about them Cowboys? How about them? Well, I think how they can make the Super Bowl, it's got to be Dak Prescott. It's got to play good. I mean, they have the offensive firepower, Ty and CeeDee Lamb, Pollard. They're a very solid team offensively, but it's going to be dependent on whether or not Dak Prescott turns the ball over 3 or 4 times like he typically does in big situations. They also may have a slight advantage because my grandpa, who is in heaven, was a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan. But other than that, I think the reason they, don't potentially advance or make the Super Bowl is just they're too turnover prone. I mean, their defense is pretty solid at times, but outside of Parsons, they don't have a lot else. Lawrence and Parsons, I should say. Lawrence is a beast. But, Diggs had the INTs last year, but he also gave up the most yards. He's not as great of a corner as people believe. I just think it's a lack of all-around team, a great team defense, and that's why the Cowboys are just the Cowboys.
They sure are. All right. So I got stuck with the only NFL team to make the playoffs this season with a losing record. I have the number 4 seed in the NFC, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. How can the Tampa Bay Buccaneers win the Super Bowl? Well, they're already the luckiest team in the league. They probably should be 5-12 this year, and yet they are division champions. They didn't lead their own division in point differential. They got smacked around a lot this year. So they can win the Super Bowl with the biggest golden horseshoe in the world, and don't put it past them to have that. Why they can't win the Super Bowl? Because they're not a good team. They just are. At least offensively, they're not a good team. They're still a great defensive team. They can stop the run. They can stop the pass. They can do all of that. Offensively, I think they led the league in wins with 21 points or fewer scored this year. So when they're winning, it's because their defense is doing it. But with the offensive line problems they have, with the skill position players all experiencing down years this year, if their luck isn't involved, they got no chance.
On to the Eagles. We're doing this one just a little out of order because we wanted to save our 2 favorite teams for the last, and so I'm going to go ahead and do the Eagles. I mean, this is pretty simple. They're the number 1 seed. They played great all year. Their offense is, when healthy, is pretty unstoppable at times. Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith, A.J. Brown. They got a great 2 or 3 good running backs. The tight end, Goddard, he's a beast. He's back and healthy. and their defense. I mean, they just got a bunch of dogs on the D line. I mean, just pass rusher after pass rusher, great O line, great D line. This team is for real, and they're only going to get better because they're relatively young. So this team could be a force for the next 4 to 5 years. That's why the Eagles can potentially win the Super Bowl. Now, what could stop them? That would have to be, right now, would be the health of Hurts. He set out a week or two here trying to get the shoulder back on track. I think if he isn't healthy and if he takes a hard hit and, might have to come out of the game type of scenario, then the Eagles are very vulnerable. But with Hurts healthy, I think the Eagles may make it all the way.
Yeah, Steven's right. We went ahead and went out of order right there. We jumped from the 4 seed to the 1 seed so we could save our two teams next. So we're going to go back into the line here. I'm going to take the number 2 seed, my San Francisco 49ers. Why the 49ers can win the Super Bowl? Because from roster spot 1 to roster spot 53, we line up with anyone in the league. We have 2 weaknesses coming into the season in my mind. We had the interior offensive line and the secondary, and both of them have answered the call. Aaron Banks sat out his rookie year, came out fired this year. He was the leader of that offensive line for anyone not named Trent Williams. Secondary, we signed Mooney Ward out of Kansas City, and we had the emergence of Talanoa Hufanga, Uso. They have made our secondary great. We're the best defense in football. We have arguably the best skill position players in football. So that's how the 49ers can win the Super Bowl. How they can lose it? I hate to say this, but Kyle Shanahan is known to not allow the chicken wing to entirely pass through his throat, if you know what I mean. Okay, he gonna choke on it. He was the offensive coordinator in the Super Bowl where the Falcons blew a 25-point lead. He was the head coach of the 49ers when they blew an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter against the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the head coach of the 49ers when the Rams came back from 10 points down in the fourth quarter in last year's NFC Championship game. He has a tendency to not be able to close games out, and it comes down to his play calling. I am hoping, as a 49er fan, even as a neutral watching, I am hoping he has learned from those mistakes and will manage the clock better. The Niners are on a 10-game win streak, and he hasn't blown any of those games yet. So avoid that. Play a game. You got a shot.
All right, and last but not least, my Minnesota Vikings. Why can they win the Super Bowl? Easy, their offense. They have the best receiver in the NFL in Justin Jefferson. They have a dynamic quarterback this year in Kirk Cousins. TJ Hawkinson at tight end is a stud, and they still got an aging Adam Thielen who can contribute. Minnesota is a very great offensive team. They definitely overachieved this win. They played in a lot of one-score games, so they're used to close games. In fact, they were 11-0 in one-score games this season, which is, just unheard of. The reasons, though, that they can't, and it's been their problem all year, well, one of their 2 biggest problems all year. One, their defense is very lacking in the secondary. They give up like 350 passing yards per game. I mean, we made Mac Jones look good, and probably could have made Zach Wilson look good for God's sake. But the secondary plays better, the O-line plays good. The Vikings got a chance, but I just really worry about that O-line and secondary.
Okay, that was our quick little team-by-team breakdown. Now we want to take a look at the actual wildcard games this week, and we're just going to go in order of the NFL schedule. The first game that's going to be played is going to be Saturday at 4:30. It's going to be the Seattle Seahawks at my San Francisco 49ers. Now, the Niners, interesting point before we actually get into this. Every single one of these wildcard games is a rematch of a regular season game. I'm struggling to remember that ever happening, especially in this new era where we have 6 wildcard games instead of 4, and it's kind of crazy. But Seahawks and Niners, of course, are divisional rivals. So they played 2 games this year. Niners won them both and looked good in both games. So, I can give you an objective analysis here and tell you that the 49ers should win this game. They are a double-digit favorite. We have a 10-game winning streak, which is the best in the NFL, not just currently, but in the NFL this season, period. No team ever won 10 straight games at any point. So you might wonder that the momentum might stop at one point, and that could happen. Not seeing it this week. I see the Niners coming out, controlling the game, making some defensive stops. We allowed one touchdown to Seattle from their offense in those two games. One of them was on a blocked field goal return. And if Seattle's counting on that happening again, they're already in trouble. So I see the Niners. Maybe it won't be a big blowout score, but it should be a solid victory. What are your thoughts on the game, Steven?
Niners are going to dominate. It's a home game for them. Outside of maybe Kansas City, there may not be a better home field advantage. I just think the Niners are one of the best all-around teams in the league, top 2 or 3. As a team, they're just so much better than Seattle. It's hard to beat a team twice. It's really tough to beat them 3 times, but it's going to happen.
All right, we're going to go to the next game that's also on Saturday. This is going to be an AFC game between a couple of teams that haven't seen a whole lot of playoff success in the last few years. So one of them will be in the final 8. That's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. They played, I believe, week 3, and if I'm wrong about that, I'm close. It was definitely early in the season. In Los Angeles, Jacksonville trounced them. So, do we think Jacksonville can win again? This, to me, is maybe the hardest game to pick. If it's not the hardest, it's close to it. I've already mentioned my thoughts on the Chargers and how they charger things up. They lost their season finale to Denver. They probably didn't put in the biggest effort in that game, knowing that they were locked into the 5 seed. Had Baltimore beaten Cincinnati earlier in the day, then maybe they could have played that. Otherwise, they would have dropped to the 6. But that said, Jacksonville coming in hot. They've won a few games where they maybe weren't expected to. That Dallas game really stands out as a game that looked like they were dead in the water, and they were able to come back. This one's a true toss-up, and it seems like I'm trying to avoid making the pick because that's exactly what I'm doing. But I'm going to have to pick something at some point. I'm going to go ahead and give this one to the Jaguars. They're at home. San Diego, pardon me, I knew I was going to do it. Los Angeles is going to have to make the cross-country trip to play that game, and it's going to be on a short week. The game is Saturday. Jacksonville just played in primetime on a Saturday night and were able to win. I can see them doing it again. I'm not going to be surprised to be wrong about this, but I'm going to give the game to Jacksonville based on the momentum they have, based on the fact that they're kind of firing on all cylinders. A really underrated dude on Jacksonville, and Steven's going to appreciate this as a Georgia guy, is Tyson Campbell. He has really stepped up. I think he has a case to be, if not first team All-Pro, then certainly second team. He's had a great year. If, and it's a big if, the Chargers come in with a fully healthy receiving corps, he's going to be able to shut down at least one of those guys. And if that receiving corps is not completely healthy, then they're going to have a tough time moving the ball. So give me the Jaguars in this one.
I agree with you. I think Jacksonville, Duval, it's going to be a tough place to play. They've got a good fan base, despite being, usually in the cellar of the NFL. Jaguars, I think, just come out, run the ball. Trevor Lawrence has some magic, and I think the Chargers are just going to do what they do and charger it up. I was looking to see, but I think Williams is okay at receiver. I thought he was hurt, but it looks like he's going to play. But I just think Chargers they make so many silly mistakes, and it's their coach. He's, going for it on 4th and 8 on your own 30, and he just does so many crazy things, and I just look for them to have a fumble or a pick late to give Jacksonville the win.
That seems reasonable. Staley, I love his aggressiveness, but you got to pick your battles sometimes. Yeah.
He's just so analytic by the analytics, and it just usually costs him the game, and I think this could be a prime example of it.
All righty. Next up, we have the Sunday afternoon game. It'll be the morning game for those of you on the West Coast. We have the Miami Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills, also division rivals, so they played twice this year, and they split them. Miami won at home, Buffalo won at home, but they were both close games. It seems like, to me, though, that even though the same two teams are going to be on the field for the third time, that it's really not the same two teams. That Miami snuck in. They were able to beat the Jets on the last game of the season. Had they lost that game, this would be Pittsburgh in the playoffs. And Buffalo, we've mentioned the emotion that is running behind that team with the entire DeMar Hamlin situation. For the record, we are thrilled that DeMar is doing better. He has been released. He's home in Buffalo now. When they said he went home, I thought maybe he went to Pittsburgh, but they said Buffalo, so He is from Pittsburgh. He played at Pittsburgh. And
Yinzer.
Right, and let's not forget, though, that he has been starting for them at safety because Micah Hyde's been out. So there might be some weakness in that secondary. And if anybody can exploit that weakness, it's the Miami Dolphins with their two dynamic wide receivers. And they have a good tight end in Mike Gesicki who could exploit that. He's just not the fit for this offense. That's why his numbers aren't what they are, but he could step up for one game. I'm saying all this to keep you engaged because at the end of the day, Buffalo is going to win this game. They should win this game. When I say the Niners, 1-53, have maybe the best roster in football, it's because Buffalo probably does. And for them to get to host this game, and we saw what their crowd was like last week in the regular season finale against the Patriots, I see them being even more amped up for this one. They've probably been the best team in football over the past 2 years. They don't have a Super Bowl to show for it. And they were my pick before the season to win the Super Bowl. I'm not going to betray that pick here in the first round at home against Miami. So let's go ahead and give this one to Buffalo from my end.
Yeah, the Dolphins flying to Buffalo in the cold to a playing or otherwise. I mean, Bills just too much. The Bills have a great offense, a pretty tough-ass defense, and I just think the Dolphins are just devastated by injury. They have no shot. Buffalo by 10 plus.
Yeah, 10 plus sounds good to me. Let's move on now to an NFC matchup between the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants. And this is a rematch of a game that was late in the season where Minnesota dramatically, with a 61, 62, 60-plus yard field goal at the end to win it, where it looked like they had control of the game and then they released control of the game, which has been a little bit of the opposite of what Minnesota's done throughout most of their one-score wins. They tended to be the ones who were chasing the game instead of the ones holding it off. So if this game looks like that game, and there's little reason to believe otherwise, then it's probably going to be a close game. And Minnesota does have a tremendous home field advantage, especially because they're in a dome. They can make a lot of noise. I actually have never seen a crowd go as crazy as that Minnesota crowd did when the Minneapolis Miracle happened. And, of course, you will say, wow, that was a big play. Of course they're going to go crazy. But it was something different. And that play, remember, at the time, the NFL had the rule where you had to come out and kick the extra point. Right. Now, because of that game is the reason that was not a rule anymore. If you score as time expires, it's over. That took a long time to settle, and that crowd was still going throughout all that. So, and I mentioned that I'm not fond of the Giants this year. I'm really not. But I look at this game, and I apologize, but I do think the Giants win. And I think that the game will look like the last game, except that Minnesota won't have that end instinct that they've shown so much this year. It's impressive to win 11 one-score games. It really is. It's also not sustainable. And at some point, it's going to get them. It might not be this game. It might not even be this season. They can win the Super Bowl and turn around next year and be 4-8 in similar one-score games, and all of a sudden we're looking at them as similar to the Rams this year as defending champions. Who knows? It's tough to predict when it will catch up, but it will catch up. I just happen to think it'll be this week, and it'll be their first one-score game that they've lost.
No, I can see your point there. Minnesota's got a pretty bad defense. I mean, they've got two guys, in Zadarius Smith and Danielle Hunter, that can get to the pass rusher, and if they don't, their secondary just can't stop anything. So I think this is an ugly game. I think Minnesota finds a way to win at home, like a 27-21, 27-24 type of game. Could very very easily come down to a field goal. I just like Kirk Cousins. I think he gets it done one more time in Minnesota, and the next week might be the when the bubble burst. But this week I think we get at least one more win.
All right, so Steven and I were in perfect agreement in the first 3 games. We had a little difference of opinion on this one, so we're not one mind here. The Sunday night game, and this is the coin toss that never was. This is going to be the Baltimore Ravens at the Cincinnati Bengals. Before we talk about this game, I loved Joe Mixon's coin flip celebration there. That was kind of neat. I'm sure if he hasn't already been fined, that he will get fined,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure that not a dollar is going to leave his pocket because someone will cover that fine for him, whether it's his teammates, his ownership, the fans. Who knows? Yeah,
Start a GoFundMe right now.
right for a millionaire. But interestingly enough, all that said, this game is not going to be the same as last week's game. And again, I'm not a quarterback-centric guy, but when you've got someone like Lamar Jackson, who is more than a quarterback, he might be, between him and Tyreek Hill, the most dangerous player in the NFL with a football in his hands. I think I'd have to take Tyreek first. That's not to diss Lamar. I would take him second. For me to say that about a quarterback who has once led the NFL in touchdown passes for an entire season during his MVP year of 2019, that's such a weapon. And Steven was right in his analysis of the Ravens. Their wide receiver core is shaky at best. Their best receiver last year was Marquise Brown. He's no longer on the team. Their best wide receiver this season has been Rashad Bateman. He is no longer healthy to be able to play on this team. So they're going to have to take advantage of the intermediate passing game and the running attack. It's not just Lamar. You got a stable of running backs back there, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and whoever else they might put back there that can help them win the time of possession and make Cincinnati feel like they have to become one-dimensional. Cincinnati can win just throwing the ball, but they're better when they're running the ball too. And I think Baltimore takes that away from them, not just because of time of possession, but because of that defense. And there's 2 guys you want to spotlight here. One's a Georgia guy, Roquan Smith. Georgia has a lot of good football players, don't they?
Quite the pipeline.
Yeah, my goodness. And another SEC guy, Patrick Queen, who has elevated his game since the arrival of Roquan. And Roquan is basically your do-everything backer, and Queen's turned into your sideline-to-sideline backer. Despite the fact that Lamar's missed the last 5 games, they've stayed in games. They've won some, not as many as they'd like, but Lamar adds points to that offense. So Bengals fans, my deepest apologies. I'm picking the upset here. I do believe Baltimore wins this game and advances to the next round.
Another game we're going to disagree on. I say, welcome to the jungle, Ravens. That's right. I think the Bengals comes out. They're fired up. They're gonna put up 40 on the Ravens, and I think this is gonna be a little bit more of a coming out party for Burrow. I think Burrow's gonna light them up. The Bengals are fired up over the whole coin toss thing. I think this has brought the team closer together. I look for the Bengals to win by, I'll say 11-14. I think it's going to be a double digit. I think the Bengals at home can beat anybody.
Fair. We got one more game to go, and big shocker that they put this game on Monday night. It's going to be the Dallas Cowboys at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The golden team and the golden boy. La, la, la. So this also has a chance to be the most boring of all the games because where Tampa struggles is their offensive line. And Dallas has a ferocious pass rush. They do, and they don't need to blitz. They're probably not. If they're smart, they don't blitz at all. Everyone's focusing on the offense for Dallas, and that's fair. The numbers that I've been seeing since Dak Prescott returned from his injury paint a great picture of the Cowboy offense. And Dak is capable of throwing some mind-numbingly dumb interceptions. Yes. But I think in this game, he doesn't need to concern himself with that. Tampa does have a good defense, but they're a beatable defense, especially if you come at them with a balanced attack. I will point you to Exhibit A, the San Francisco game, where the Niners came out and just absolutely took care of business and were up 35-0 early in the third quarter. I don't see anything quite like that in this game. I do understand that Dallas did play Tampa early in this season, week 1, in Dallas, and only scored 3 points, losing 19-3. Another Buccaneer victory where they couldn't score 21 points.
Right.
But Dallas should handle this game. I understand they're the road team, but they're the favorites. The first 3 games of this wildcard weekend, I picked the home team to win. These last 3 games, I have picked the road team to win. I'm going to go ahead and say Dallas in a comfortable win, if not a blowout by any means. I think Tampa's really good at scoring late to make the game look close, for one thing. But I'd say low scoring, not a lot of offensive fireworks, 20-10, 20-13, something like that. But Dallas wins and advances.
Yeah, I agree. I think Dallas goes into Tampa Bay, beats Tampa Bay, and I've got even a one more prediction for you. I think this is Brady's last game as a Buccaneer. I think after this year he goes out west, maybe the Raiders, but I think this will be Tom Brady's last game as a Buccaneer, and I think it'll be the Buccaneers' last game of the season. I got Dallas big, 27-10, 28-13, somewhere along there.
Yeah, Brady only went to the Buccaneers because he knew they had an absolute squad that were being held back by a quarterback that could not help but throw the ball to the other team constantly. All they needed, that 2019 Bucs team, all they needed was someone not to turn the ball over literally twice a game, which is what Winston was averaging. More than 30 picks with lost fumbles. I mean, he was literally turning the ball over every half on average. So, yeah, he went there, was able to stabilize that position, do nothing special, and let the team carry him, which is what they did. And it was very successful. Brady's one smart dude. So he knows that team isn't coming back in 2023 with the kind of talent they've had in the past. So I think he's out of there too. So sorry for the sidetrack there, folks. We did want to talk about the game, but I had to get that 2 cents out. So my bad. I am 2 cents poorer for that. So those are our wild card predictions. We agree on 4 of them. We disagree on a couple. That's perfectly good. One of us is going to be more right than the other, most likely. It could be that we even out, or the 2 games we disagree on, one of us gets one and the other gets the other. But that's why football is great, because in reality, there is nothing to say that all of our predictions could be wrong, and some of these teams can come out and win. Yeah, happen. They can happen, and as Chris Berman says, that's why they play the games. So. Thank you for hopefully enjoying our playoff picks. Before we sign off for today, we want to put a little bow on this whole TCU Georgia game. Again, before we do that, congratulations to Georgia. I think Steven's going to agree with me. Georgia's not 58 points better than TCU. They certainly were last night. If they played the game 100 times, a blowout like that might happen 4 to 5 times.
Tops.
Where maybe TCU could win. It'd be nice here 10 to 15 times maybe. That's reasonable, 10 or 15 times.
Out of 100.
Out of 100, But Georgia came out, played their best game of the season.
By far.
TCU certainly did not. I don't think the moment was too big for them because the semifinal would have been where that would have happened. I just think they came out and got smacked in the mouth and had no response. And that's unfortunate. Again, TCU, you made me proud this year. I'm disappointed in the result of this game. Not just that we lost by 58 points.
Video game.
Yeah, Georgia covered the over by themselves in this game. We laugh, but it's true. The over-under was 62, and they got 65 all on their own. And, it should have been 66. I think the kicker's leg got so tired he couldn't make that last extra point. So that's my last bit on that. Put a bow on the game for us, Steven.
No, it was a great game, totally dominated by the Dawgs. The defense hunted. They got after the quarterback and really just showed the world and why Georgia is the number 1 college football program in America right now. And, I just couldn't be more proud. It's been an exciting year. looking back at how far this team has come, because there was adversity at times. But, we got a great head coach. Congratulations to the Georgia Bulldogs. Congratulations to Kirby Smart. And go Dogs, sick 'em.
You definitely have a great coach and a great program. And like I said, I am almost expecting a repeat for you guys. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us this week on the Catching Flies podcast. We are certainly going to be back next Tuesday for another show. The NFL playoffs are going to be underway by the time that show begins. And I'm sure we're going to have some thoughts on that and maybe something else to think about as well. I'm going to go ahead and sign off for myself. As per usual, I'm going to hand it over to Steven to give you all the social media information that you need. I thank you for listening. Anyone who's stuck with us this entire time, you are awesome. I ask that you please pass along the word. We think we're doing a pretty good job here. We know we're not perfect, but we're looking to improve. And the more ears we have on the show, the more feedback we can receive. And we appreciate any and all feedback. We're getting some privately. If you guys don't mind posting it directly onto YouTube, let people know you're there. That would be great for us too. So from me, Pete, I thank you again. Thank you, TCU. Go Frogs. Hopefully we're back next season. We got a lot to wipe off. We got a lot of shit to wipe off the shoes, so to speak, for this one. But national runner-ups, that's something for me. Over to Steven. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you guys for listening in. Our YouTube's really been doing great and blowing up. So like Pete said, like, follow, share, all that good stuff. You can follow us on Twitter at CatchingFliesW1. That's at CatchingFliesW1. I am Steven Burton, also on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. I'll always be posting stuff about the show or just random sports drops. And we do appreciate the feedback. That's how we're going to get better. So thank you guys, and go Dogs.